I partake in the parent side of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the LEND program that some hospitals and things do, but it's medical residents go through it, and they decide that they're going to do a LEND fellowship, and it's related. I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's to better help them understand perspectives of families with children with intellectual or developmental disabilities and understand maybe their day-to-day or their walk through life, both as the patient or the children and then the parents. I'm on the parent side of where I volunteer to do LEND, and I get a resident like a semester, and when it was not COVID, they would come into the house for several hours and do almost like day in the life or whatever. They'd observe his therapies or things like that. And I've met some really great ones. We do just kind of Zoom calls now. And they were asking kind of these same things, like what programs could the NICU implement or things like that. And I shared most of what I already did, but I was saying that I feel like if parents consented to it, obviously from a HIPAA perspective and things like that, that peer-to-peer program that they do for the volunteers who come to the NICU, I think parents could really benefit from it when they are discharged, like having somebody who's been through it, like a peer-to-peer type thing, check up on you when you've been discharged and check on how the family's doing, like just a couple weeks out. And, really peer-to-peer does not obviously at all replace professional care, and that's still necessary. And I would have still needed that too. But I think there is something comforting just talking to someone who's been through it or who's gone through it, who understands, and having that shared, just like, oh yes, you get it. Is there some degree of that? So I do think like a program like that can be beneficial sometimes for people, but obviously it's a little bit of an undertaking. You'd have to make sure everyone was consented to it and HIPAA and all of that, but.
That's awesome. That sounds like a wonderful program. I think what you were mentioning before, when people were like, at least this or that, I think a lot of the time when you have gone through something and people kind of saw that process, but then you go home and then baby goes home and they're like, oh, everybody's all better now because you're not at the hospital. And it makes it that much harder to find support that's not irritating the crap out of you because you feel very dismissed. Or if you have a baby who, I know for my child, he couldn't have any kind of stimulation. He was born early. So we were taught, low stimulation. And people are like, well, he's fine now. He's 2 months old or 3 months old. I'm like, you still can't toss him around and dance with him and stuff.
Yeah.
We need it to be quiet. We need it to be, so that really limited our ability to find someone to help who could just walk with us through that. And it left us very, very upset and very strained. So having peer-to-peer help, what an amazing bridge for, however long it takes.
I agree. And that's why I'm like, I really think that could be beneficial. And so I really have, when people have asked and the NICU surveys ask for it, that's something I've shared. I've just been like, that would have been really helpful to have that just to somebody, because not everybody who has a NICU experience has somebody in their like natural support circle in life who's also been through that or even been through anything similar. So, and the LEND program that I participate from on the parent side, I love the LEND program because it really helps doctors who may have gone through medical school and all these things and not had a lot of actual tangible face interaction with and interfacing with individuals or their families of people who have any sort of intellectual or developmental disability, and really helps gain better, full, well-rounded perspective with things like bedside manner and being trauma informed and understanding, some of the factors that may, make somebody approach or be seemingly oppositional or nervous in their care, things like that. So I think the LEND program is phenomenal too. I think that, the doctors who go through it, that can do nothing but help them in navigating their careers.
And I think you're onto something, because with all of our stuff with Gavin, I noticed there seems to be, and I don't know if it's still kind of like almost like a stigma or something, but around trauma and loss, there seems to be like, we just kind of have a little bit of a missing, like a little hole that has to do with maybe medical. Some doctors handle it very well. Maybe they've experienced it before and they've figured out better resources or ways to do things. Some nurses, they know, some of them have experienced loss, some of them have seen loss, but I've noticed it is really hard to get that like that support afterwards. It gets really like you get kind of lost, and it is different being at the hospital. And then when you go home, it's like, you're home now. Like, it's like, whatever, like we can forget about you kind of thing. And it is something different. And probably one of the biggest things that helped us through our grief and through everything was learning there was other people like us and being able to talk to them about our experience, because it felt like whenever you were talking to other people, it either made them really uncomfortable or they didn't want to hear it, or, or it was just like they didn't know what to say. So sometimes you didn't know what reaction you were going to get. If you're going to have somebody that just doesn't want to listen to you and wants to kind of just push you away and shut you down and be like, okay, we're done here. Like, let's just, okay, bye, whatever. Or somebody that kind of just wants to magically erase all your pain and trauma and all your stuff. So it was kind of a weird thing. And so, so I definitely get that, because amazingly, I'm in this big city and we really didn't have there's not actually very many like grief groups. Like you can find them online. Like they're online now, so we can find each other. But like in person and people right here, like they really just don't exist. And then when you talk online and you hear people share their experiences, every so often you hear about trauma. But a lot of us either are not accepting our trauma, or we're not talking about our trauma, or, so, and a lot of people get really freaked out to tell me about their trauma because they're like, oh, my baby lived. And I'm like, okay, but your trauma still matters, and your baby still matters, and you still matter. So I think that's like a whole nother thing that we could definitely be working on. Like everybody could be working on, because, and that's why I always say we need to be sharing. We need to be, talking about our experiences, because we could help somebody else that's in the same situation, and somebody that's not getting, you went off and you were aware before stepping into this, you knew about anxiety and depression, but someone else might not be aware, then goes through all this trauma, goes through this NICU stuff, goes through all this stuff, and then ends up with a whole different level of like postpartum depression, and isn't telling anybody that I am crying this often. Oh, I am getting these thoughts. Oh, I am whatever. Like, because yes, we do get the little thing. And honestly, I didn't get those, by the way. I lost my baby and nobody gave me those papers. I went to doctor's offices and nobody gave me the little checkbox, or how many hours are you sleeping? Or are you sleeping? Are you eating? I never got that. So I didn't get diagnosed till last year. Or wait, no, last year was COVID, the year before. So literally it's like about 2 years ago, I got diagnosed I went to a primary care and they gave me the sheet and I was like, whatever. And now it's like years later where I don't care. But if they would have gave it to me, the same sheet, maybe afterwards, I don't know how well I would have answered, because I would have been like, how many hours am I sleeping? I don't know. I don't know if I can even answer. And in a weird way of what you're saying, it makes me almost feel like we have to sit down with somebody and be like, let's go through this. Not somebody medical where it's like almost whatever, but somebody that's on a peer level of, you've experienced trauma, I've experienced trauma. Let's go through this little paper together as like a little team to tell me the truth. You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes we don't even know. Going through trauma stuff, like just like you said, when you brought up the pin thing, I thought about how well our brain can block out things of whatever. And I also think about like with trauma and loss of how often are you eating? You could ask and we'd be like, I don't know. I don't even know if I've ate today. Did I even brush my teeth today? I have no idea. Like, it's like that. And so I think that is a big thing of like us working with the peers. I think that and what you're doing with hospitals, with residents, that's like perfect, because you're teaching them early. They're not going to have a career and then they're like, oh, I should have known about that. You're teaching them right as they're going in to get into the hospitals, so they're aware, so they can do all that. And I think it's all resources and connections, and I think it makes all the difference.
One thing I'll say related to, so in terms, a couple different things I think of related to like mental health after baby is one thing in terms of why parents who just had a baby might lie or, just one, like you said, they're not actually truly aware of like how sometimes you can't process things in real time. So you don't even really recognize, yes, my answer actually is more than these. Second, sometimes people who are experiencing severe postpartum depression or mental health issues might feel like the hospital is going to take their baby from them if they share that truly how they're honestly feeling. So there's this fear of like, I'm gonna get my baby taken away from me if I write yes to these things. So I think it's important for parents to know that, like, no, that's not the case. It's really just going to get you the help you need. And the second thing I will say is that I think too, sometimes postpartum mental health issues don't all look the same, and it might not come out. So yes, there is like the PTSD, there's anxiety, there's depression, and underneath those umbrellas, there's things like hypervigilance and just generalized irritation, anger, things like that. But I remember like, and my sister has given me permission to share this, but my sister had pretty rough delivery. She had a 34-weeker because she had HELLP syndrome. And my sister still has actually lasting health issues related to how sick she was, you know, towards the end of her pregnancy, having such severe preeclampsia and having HELLP syndrome. She, really experienced severe postpartum depression after the birth of her second baby. And she said she felt off and she didn't feel well, but she said she just was like, well, I didn't want, and she was just very like, she was like, I didn't want to hurt my baby. So I just didn't think it was anything. I felt like everything I had ever heard is if you just want to hurt your baby, and if you don't want to hurt your baby, you're probably fine. She's like, I didn't want to hurt her. So I felt like I was fine, but it was like me coming over to help and me noticing, like, I picked up on little things. Like she had pumped and put milk in and so she had like a bottle in the fridge, and I was like, oh, here, I'll grab it. I'll feed her. I'll just warm it up. And she was like, it's fine. She'll just drink it cold too, but she said it kind of like that. And she was like, she'll just drink it cold. She'll drink whatever. It's fine. And I remember just being like, and that might've been true. And it might've been fine that like she drank the cold breast milk and would have been fine with it. But it kind of just, I remember it signaled for me, like, I don't know, I felt it was almost like apathetic. Like, so it didn't come across necessarily as depressed or anything. She came across as just kind of like, blah, like, yeah, she's fine. You can just give her that cold bottle. And I remember just being a thing. And then that prompted me to kind of like ask some questions and be like, hey, are you feeling okay? Have you been sleeping? How has your health been going since you've been discharged? And, is your blood pressure finally down? Or the medication still making you feel crappy? And then she was able to realize like, oh man, I really am just living in a fog. I really am just feeling really ambivalent about everything. And I am struggling in my own way. And even though it's not the way postpartum depression is necessarily depicted in a movie or in how you would anticipate, it was still really valid, and she still needed to be cared for.